There we go. Hi, I'm Craig, as introed. Really excited to be here. Looking forward to meeting you all. This is the start of my third month, so I know just enough about Tinuiti to be dangerous. And I thank Zach for his confidence in allowing me to come up here while I'm in that state. I have spent more than 20 years in various agency positions, almost always in a role that is sort of harnessing the future and figure out how to clients to grow and benefit from that. And so the clicker is right here. Perfect. Thinking about growth, this image is of a particular kind of bamboo that's called moso bamboo. It's one of my favorite things. It's also it's the fastest growing living thing in the world. It grows as much as 3 feet in a day, and believe it or not, you can actually detect it on a radar detector. It is actively growing that fast. Admittedly, it's a small number. But I like to think about bamboo, and I like to think about the balance of Mother Nature, because Mother Nature has it figured out. Despite our best efforts to the contrary, balance works, right? You grow things, you harvest things, you move on. And I don't think I'm being overly dramatic when I say that humans are not good at balance, right? We don't do balance well. It's broadly not in our nature. Brigitte presented several examples of that happening, and I must admit, again, 20 years in, I don't feel like our business gets balanced well. We tend to jump on things that we think are working, and we go all in wherever we can find that. And so sometimes, I don't know about you all, but sometimes I'm going to show an image of what I feel like our business feels like sometimes. And our business feels to me a bit like a very overdeveloped, lopsided guy, all right? And so those are supposed to be tattoos, by the way. But when we learn something that works, we go after it, right? So we go after things like ROAS because we know how to prove that. And it's an attribution bell we start ringing over and over and over again. And however, we forget that perhaps even, certainly at least as important part of the equation, something like reach, something like finding new customers, it's not as easy to prove. It's really not. It doesn't ring the same bell, and as a result, we start following up and getting lopsided. I meet lots of clients who say things to me like, you know what, nothing's really changed. We continue to grow our business, but our cost per whatever, lead, conversion, or ROAS just keeps creeping up. My first answer is always, are you finding new customers? And I gotta tell you, 80+% of the time, they're not, right? And so a big part of what this talk is going to be, and when I bring Tommy Bahama up, is about the notion of how do we refine and rebalance ourselves in a way that may not initially feel comfortable, right? It often doesn't have the same immediate response and gratification that a lot of the right bicep world does. And it's alluring, even though this guy is crushing too many curls on his right side. As a business, this is how we behave. But we learned, again, to go back to what we learned as kids, everyone learns we reap what we sow. But the problem is we've developed into a reap-seeking missile of a business. And so we reap and reap and reap and reap and reap. And we end up in a bit of a Dust Bowl situation where if we haven't gone and continued to plant and continued to look for areas to grow in places that are not going to provide an immediate conversion, we kind of scratch our heads and wonder kind of what's going on. And so one of the things I would say is, so as someone who is in a point in their lives that is going through something out of my comfort zone, changing a big new job, my mom sent me this card when I moved to New York 8 years ago as a very mom thing to do. Like, honey, great, congratulations, good luck in New York. Well, actually, my mom's from Boston, so she said, good luck in New York. And, as a really mom thing, and I love this card, but I think the reality is growth begins at the end of your comfort zone. So I would say, as a piece of advice, even if something feels uncomfortable that gets presented, it's probably good, it's probably helping, it's at least worth thinking about. So as I launch into this stuff, I think when we think about how do we begin to change the conversation to a more balanced approach, I think there are kind of 4 areas, and some of them will feel probably like, what the hell is he talking about? I know this may not be right. The first off is your audience, right? I've stood on many stages over the last 10 to 15 years and talked about the importance of targeting and how precise we can be and how important that is, and retargeting and go finding people. And I couldn't have asked for a better setup that you just saw of the unintended consequences of that. And so my point here is, yes, we should target where we know, and we should find those niche audiences, but we cannot grow our business on niche audiences. And I'm going to show you some data over a wide range of time, clients, and categories that proves that, in fact, a much broader approach grows your business more quickly. It's not to say that targeting is not important. Of course it is. But it's a balance. It's finding that middle ground again. The next part is what I've called hit them in the feels, right? So many performance marketing approaches tend to be very quick turn, right? So we've got a sale, we've got a bonus, please come back, shopping cart abandonment, all that kind of stuff is very, very direct. That may turn somebody. It's not going to connect in any way to them. I also have some data I want to show you about how to think about balancing that approach for a long term if you want that customer to come back and you want them to feel connected to your brand. I think one of the biggest challenges we all face as marketers, and by the way, I hate to say it, I think the challenge is going to get worse and more complicated for the rest of our careers in this business, is structure. Like, how do we build ourselves in a way that allows us to maintain deep discipline, right? We at Tinuiti have this exact challenge, which is you hire us because we are outstanding at delivering within individual channels, but as we all get to connect those channels and learn how they interconnect, we need people in the middle that are a peer to you that can sit down and talk about how we connect the dots horizontally, right? And I know I've met many clients that have this exact same challenge. So I'm curious, if you want to do a show of hands, how many people think that their marketing organization is set up in a way that is actually reflective of how the customer sees your world? Okay, anybody else? Wow, okay, I think that was a 0. It may have been a discrete 1 or 2. So this is something we need to talk about and keep talking about. And as I say to folks, I know people get really into org charts and what they look like. The way the world is going, those things are going to be points in time, and see them always as fluid. And then finally, anyone that comes up and tells you how much exactly within precise percentages your brand and demand allocation should be is selling you something. There's no direct answer. There's no specific secret bullet in this. The hardest part about this is you have to feel your way into it. You have to test your way into it. You have to talk to smart people like my friend Andrew Richardson back there about how to find a way quantitatively but also qualitatively to do it. All right, so let's talk about targeting. So there's an organization called the IPA. It stands for the Institute for the Practitioners of Advertising. They did a study most recently that was 1,000 campaigns, 800 brands, and 80 categories. So whatever category you're in, guaranteed that was part of the study. And what they said was, okay, brands, tell us about the campaigns you had that had extremely high, they wrote very large profit growth. It wasn't a number, but essentially to go to them and say, tell us where they were and what were you targeting? Right? So who are these people and how are you finding them? And so what I think was really interesting is by far the best numbers came from those that not only were looking for new customers, but actually were just targeting the entire market itself. Now, there can be a reaction to this, which is, well, my product is super high consideration, high price, and so therefore I have to target. I get that. All of that is blended in here, right? And this is every market, of course there will be differences. However, none of these, I went back and looked, none of the data shows that existing customers had the single biggest growth rate. So within that, you've got to start, and then new customers over time prove out year over year. So there's a lot of data that shows, in fact, keeping your laser focus on the new customer over time will be the way to go here. So the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit was about this notion of hit them in the feels. And so, like the other guy I showed you, I like to have a visual inspiration for things. And so you know us, if you're one of our clients, we like to have goals. And so I'm just throwing out there for the Tinuiti guys in the room, I'm going to go for, this is the reaction I want for every piece of creative that we're doing. Search copy included, everything, right? So this is what we want. We want this guy. Like, I want awe. I want people to be super excited and inspired by what's going on, right? Obviously, I'm making an outrageous exaggeration to make a point. The only way to build relationships with people is to start to trigger some small version of what this guy's feeling right now. And the way that we're going to do that is by planning it out, making a connection with them emotionally rather than rationally. So a similar output from the study I mentioned before, which I find quite interesting, is the notion that what they did was they plotted the effects long-term of a rational message versus an emotional message. And so, as you can see, no surprise, the rational message actually does have a quicker impact, but it degrades, and it never grows beyond a certain point. Whereas on the emotional side, that's literally where you're building your equity. And you can see sort of like midway through the chart, you can actually see where it starts exceeding, and that is where you see brands that have existed for many years that are successful because they have this equity to pull on. One example of this might be, think about how you start a fire. If you're out camping, you're gonna want some lighter fluid. You're gonna want a spark, right? That's the immediate stuff. That's the short-term rational stuff. But once you get the fire going, you wanna put in larger and larger logs, hardwood that will grow and burn long-term. That's the emotional stuff. So the trick is finding that right balance between those messages so they're additive. The very revealing hands up example that I showed you earlier, that you participated, in earlier, I actually used to make a joke about going to Silo City. One of the things I've been doing in lots of my jobs recently is trying to break down silos or at least connect them. There is actually a Silo City. It's in Buffalo, New York. This is a picture of Silo City. And I feel like, and I speak to a lot of clients that feel like they're in Silo City. And the reason why is we all built these organizations for the ones that are established 25 years ago when you really were focused around how you went to market, not who your customer was. And I know, because I've, again, had this feedback that people, it can be a sort of debilitating feeling of like, I'm just, I'm running, I'm a director, manager, VP, whatever I am, within a silo. I can't change the structure of this company. I'm not empowered to do that. And I gotta tell you, the ones that are successful in doing this kind of say, you know what, I'm gonna just do what I need to do to grow my company. And a lot of it has to do with looking at the org chart and finding your way through. And this is another thing that we're going to talk about with Tommy Bahama, is to say, how do you take what you have, understand that it is what it is, and just get on with growing and moving on. It's why you start to see so many chief customer officers, chief experience officers that are out in the world. And what happens in those situations, in my experience, is that you get someone that comes in and is full of energy to try to change things, and sits at the top and sort of pushes this down, where you have people at the bottom kind of pushing it up. And everyone is in this stage of going through wet cement to figure it out. I think the reality is, I would set your expectation to, unless you work for a super small, high growth organization where you can set your own rules, this is something you're just going to have to work through, probably for the rest of your careers, as every time we roll out a new organization, it's going to be very quickly changed and exceeded by how consumers are choosing to engage. So the last thing I would say in regards to Silo City is we love funnels in this business. We talk a lot about funnels. I think I probably don't go 2 hours without saying the word funnel. Really, while harder to construct, customer journeys are things that we need to start to lean into more specifically and build analytics around. You'll see a lot of customer journeys that are sort of aspirational and sort of creatively oriented. Those are great. I think what we need to do is really lean into the future of how we quantify what those things are. One of the things that we get a lot of feedback, and I've gotten a lot of feedback, is, well, you know what, we tried this brand campaign, and my God, the ROAS just was terrible. We did terrible. It didn't compare at all to all this lower funnel stuff. I understand why this happens, but truly it is the definition of insanity, where we're continue to do the same thing over and over again. You as clients come to us and say, please help me, cut all of the top line stuff because it doesn't meet our ROAS goals. And we say to you, it was never designed to immediately drive ROAS. That's not the point. We do that. We all do that. Every organization I work with has this problem. And it was another reason why we want to hear from Tommy Bahama, because they found a nice way of sort of bridging the gap between marketing and finance, because that tends to be what's going on here. I would just say, it doesn't matter what is actually literally within the KPIs on this. Please, let's all just agree to hold hands and understand that certain tactics are designed to do certain things, not others. We can certainly help you construct ways of showing why reach and finding new customers is accretive to making your cost pers go down. Very often that happens. But as long as we hold things on the top that are reflective of the bottom, it's not going to work. We're going to keep spinning on this topic. We'd love to make progress against that. Okay, so this last piece before I have the guys come up is that my attempt to say, all right, the way I think about things from a spend perspective is there's a continuum. So you could spend 100% of your money driving brand or 100% of your money driving demand. So think about, if you look at this chart, think about a slider that you could slide, right? And everywhere in between those points that adds up to 100, and there's some change. So I can say for sure, right? So the question should be, great, what's my mix? How should I spend my money? What should I do? How, et cetera. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, the answer is it depends. There are a couple discrete, very specific things, right? So the first one is, these are no, right? So like 95% brand, 5% demand, not the right answer. 5% brand, 95% demand, which we do have in some instances, probably not the answer. And I would go another step and say, unless you have some very specific examples like, we just launched a product and it's going bananas of all this organic natural growth, we just want to harvest more. Okay, maybe short term that makes sense. Same with a brand, we just launched something brand new, no one's ever heard of this thing. Please help us find more people to sort of register awareness of it. Great. The reality is the answer is somewhere in this green box. We would love to help you find this answer, right? And we have a lot of folks who can very specifically help you get there through things like incrementality testing and really finding who these new customers are and how we convert the ones we have, and by the way, keep the ones you already have. And somewhere in this green, we all get home happy and get our bonuses. Really, that's what the green is in this space. And so what I want to do from here is have Andy and Ty come up, and we can move to talking about how Tommy Bahama sees this and works through these challenges. So please give these guys a hand as they come up.